Well, what a beautiful film, and we are very fortunate and privileged to have the co-directors of the film, Cathy Henkel and Sam Lara, here with us. Congratulations to you both. This is a pre-recorded Q&A that we have done for the ACME AIDC screening. So we're very sorry we can't be there in person, but we hope you've enjoyed the film, those who are. And it's certainly one that provokes a lot of questions. My name is Stephen Oliver. I'm the commissioning editor of documentaries at the ABC, and I'm very proud of this film that Cathy and Sam have made. So let's kick straight into it. So since Laura's death in 2019, you've both been largely locked in an edit suite, making this beautiful film. How has this helped or hindered the grieving process, and how have you come to terms with what happened, having to see it on screen so often?
Yeah, it's not your normal grieving process. Normally when something happens, you're given that you need to grieve from, you're given space from it, and you're able to process it. And I think in a more removed way. And so Cathy and I have spent the last 12 months watching Laura's death and watching the events in the lead up to Laura's death over and over, which definitely, I think, probably slowed down the grieving process. And there were definitely some really challenging moments. Having to watch, for example, the fall over and over again was challenging, but there were also some really beautiful things that came about. We got to watch, just as much as we get to watch the challenging stuff, we got to see Grandma and the two of us sharing some really beautiful memories, and we got to every day hear her on camera tell us how much she loves us and, you know, that she forgives me. And so capturing the good and the bad has meant that there's been some hard moments, but it's also been really rewarding.
Absolutely. And what about you, Cathy? What do you feel like you've learned from making the film and having had this sort of year to process what you went through?
Yeah, well, I think grieving is often made more difficult when, obviously, when it's untimely and when it's a shock and you're not prepared for it, or when you've got regrets or things that you couldn't say or you couldn't do or you wished you'd said and done. And I think this death was very different because we had all that time to say and do all the things we wanted to do. And in a way, my mum helped me to prepare for her death. You know, we spoke about it a lot, and it's really nice to have that time to really prepare yourself because, you know, I know it's inevitable, but it's often a thing we still push aside, even though we know it's coming. And my mum made sure that we didn't push it aside, and we did talk about all aspects of it. I mean, she was quite open about all of the aspects. So I felt very prepared, in fact, and so therefore the grieving process has been a lot easier. I still think perhaps after the ABC broadcast, I may have some private grieving to do, and that's yet in front of me. I'm not sure what that looks like.
Yes, I'm sure, because you've been so busy working and caught up in the screening of this film, and it's such a personal experience that you have put on screen so bravely, but it's clearly got a very obvious purpose, and Laura very clearly states that she wants you to make this film. What would you both say you want to happen as a result? What would you like to see that would sort of make all of this huge emotional effort and Laura's determination pay off? What do you want to see as the result of this film?
Well, I'll start because my mum was very clear to me that she wanted the film to make an impact. And obviously she said that right up until her last breath. And she wanted to start a conversation. She wanted people to talk about this. And that's probably the main thing, is that after watching it, the people will go away and really consider the sort of issues that we tend to avoid. I think it could be even broader than that. She wanted conversations within religious groups. She wanted conversations in the medical profession. And I've already heard that a bunch of doctors are looking to, after the ABC broadcast, to have conversations about how doctors respond to this, because they're in a really tricky position if someone comes to them and wants, to discuss their end of life, and often they can't. So the idea that doctors might reconsider their position and talk about how they could better help their patients would be a wonderful outcome for Mum, And so I think that's the main thing. She wanted people to talk about it. And I think the film does provoke conversations. So hopefully she'll get what she wanted.
How would you summarise what you've learned?
I learned a lot about, I think the biggest thing I learned was that death doesn't have to be traumatic. It can be quite graceful. And being there and experiencing it can be really profound, and not in a traumatizing way, but in a beautiful way. And I don't think we talk about that much as young people, and I don't think we're aware of that. So that, I learned a lot about filmmaking, but it kind of pales in comparison to the big life lessons that came about from this project.
Yeah. And that, the audience will have just seen that absolutely beautiful moment when you're walking along the banks of the Danube and the swan.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary. Can you just talk us through that moment and what went through your head then?
Yeah, I get a lot of people asking if it was planned, and I was as surprised as anyone. It was about 2 degrees. It was the coldest moment of my life. And it was this beautiful kind of frosty Viennese morning, and it was just me and the cinematographer. And I had a really kind of cathartic moment. It was the place where our cruise ship had moored 3 years earlier. So it was very cathartic. And after I scattered the ashes, just out of the mist, the swan appeared. And it actually spent about half an hour with me, and we just walked along the banks of the river together, and then it went on its way. And look, I don't know if I believe what I believe in, or if reincarnation is real, but no matter what you believe in, it was an incredibly beautiful thing to have happened, and it will stay with me forever.
I agree. It's an extraordinary end to the film, and very, very powerful, and just shows us there's more than we all understand, and I think the audience, when you've incorporated that with the beautiful soundtrack, is really, really moving and profound. Can you tell us a bit about, some of those choices that Laura made, like, for example, the going away party, the farewell party instead of a funeral? Like, that was obviously something that Laura very specifically wanted to happen, but some of her friends were uneasy about trying to celebrate and making it into a joyous occasion. Can you explain what that was like, and how you kind of got through that, and what the kind of atmosphere was like there?
Well, I'll start it. There was definitely a reluctance from some of my friends of my age group, perhaps because it's not common and they weren't sure how they were going to feel, and the idea of coming to say goodbye in a kind of zany way. I've had a friend since who saw the film and said, I really wish I'd come. I was really uneasy about it. But when I saw the Mad Hatter's Tea Party and I saw how joyously she embraced the farewell, I really regret that I didn't come. So I think it's just because it is an unusual event in our lives. And one of the things I've learned is that it's actually a lovely thing to do, to have a farewell before you go, and be able to have people come and celebrate and say those things, and for you to hear those things before you go. So I think it's a kind of missing ceremony in our culture.
I totally agree. It feels like a wonderful thing to do, to be there yourself and enjoy your own friends. But
we have a birth, and then we have a christening, or we have some kind of welcoming children into the world. We have weddings. We have these ceremonies, but with death, we have the funeral, which of course is important, but I think this way of acknowledging and celebrating a person when they know they're going is a really beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. Is that your experience, Sam? Did you feel that?
Yeah.
Was it a good experience, that party?
I mean, it was a totally bonkers idea, and I thought she was off her head when she proposed it. And I was a bit hesitant, actually, because I'd never experienced anything like it, but it was totally magical, and it was fun. And at the end of the day, you know, Cathy and I got to say what would have been our eulogies to her. And then at the end of the day, when Mum was driving her home, she said, I didn't realise that I meant so much to so many people. Throughout the night, people had been coming up and saying their private farewells. And I just thought, I bet so many people end their lives without knowing how much they meant to the people around them. Yeah. So I'm a big advocate for farewell parties now. I think they're incredibly powerful for everyone involved.
They don't have to be Mad Hatter's tea parties, but some sort of farewell. Yeah. She also said, I didn't realise people liked me so much, or that I'd influenced their life. In addition to the party, we invited all her friends who couldn't come from far and wide to write things for her, and I put it together in a book, and I gave that to her, and she read that a few times, read it on the plane going over to Switzerland again, and she really loved that because she was able to hear the influence, considered thoughts from people of the impact that she'd had on their lives.
Oh,
and these are all things that you only get to do if you know the date. You can't plan. I mean, I just don't think if I was just waiting for Grandma to die naturally, I don't think we would have done any of these things. So, yeah.
So that's it. Ultimately, it's empowering to know the date, to be able to
incredibly
plan these things on your own terms, which is ultimately the simple, you know, you have those outcomes that Laura wanted, you know, at the end of the film, which is to die on your own terms in dignity with your family around you in your own country. That feels like a simple and an obvious thing to want, but it's very, very difficult. And I know there are legal complications with all of these this topic. But if other people are thinking about this and are feeling inspired about the film, what pieces of advice could you offer for anyone thinking about this kind of thing?
I think we're going to be quite clear that Sam and I aren't offering advice. So we're not, experts, and we don't know a lot about the legal and the kind of other aspects. So we're setting up a website where we will direct people to authorities and to advocates and to people who have knowledge about this. I guess for me, the main thing I'd like to say to people is just, sit down at the kitchen table and have the conversation, and talking to each other is something that, I can certainly advocate and say is a good idea, and I'd love to see people do that.
I will just plug the broadcast so that people know when it's on. It's going to be on our new channel, ABC TV Plus, which was formerly known as ABC Comedy, on Wednesday, the 17th of March at 8:45 p.m, episode 1, and then Wednesday, the 24th of March at 9 p.m. That's on ABC TV Plus. And then it's going to be repeated on ABC TV, the main channel, on the 13th and 20th of April, so about a month later at 9:30 p.m. And it will be available on iView as soon as episode 1 has been broadcast on the 17th of March. So please tell...
Binge away.
Yeah, binge away. You'll be able to watch both episodes on iView from the 17th of March. So you've already quickly touched on what other content is going to be in those 2 episodes that you couldn't fit into the feature version. You did just mention something there, some other voices.
Yeah, Mum, and she wrote that manifesto, which you see. So it's more about her manifesto and some of the bigger questions around dying and the choice she made. So she asked us to challenge her views. So we spoke to 2 doctors, one who was in favour and one against, and a rabbi and an imam and a Buddhist, an Indigenous elder, a lawyer. So there's a range of voices that look at different aspects of this issue.
Wonderful. Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much on behalf of the ABC. Thank you very much for making such a beautiful documentary. I think it will provoke many, many conversations. I think your vulnerability and openness shines through, and I think Laura would be extremely proud of the film that you've made. It's a brilliant piece of work. So congratulations to you both and to the wider team. And I hope the audience, you have enjoyed the film and that you can tell your friends and family about the ABC broadcast. Thank you very much, Cathy Henkel and Sam Lara, for joining us today.
Thanks, Stephen.